You know, if we live not far from Mount Hood National Forest. You know, we've all been there, right?
Right.
If not, you should. It's beautiful. You know, and okay, here we go. And we know it's a. What's the majority of trees in Mount Hood National Forest? What kind of trees do we have? Fir. Yeah. Mostly evergreen type of trees, whether it's fir trees or cedars, evergreen. It's called a deciduous forest. Deciduous forest. You know. Now, maybe I could go to this forest, walk somewhere, and find a hazelnut tree. I could. Or maybe a wild cherry tree. I could take a picture of it and go make a point that Mount Hood National Forest is an orchard with fruit trees. By taking this one, I'd say, look, I have a picture of it. Look, I was just there myself. And sometimes we do the same thing with the word. We cannot judge, we cannot establish what is the forest by one tree. We establish by the overall plan of what's going on. And sometimes we do with the word, sometimes we establish with the whole theme of the word is by one verse. And we take that verse and every verse can be multifaceted too, according to culture, language, and if we do that, it's a little bit like if I take this picture that I have here. I wanted to do it, but I couldn't do it fast enough. You see, if I take this picture here, you know, this is Jerusalem. But if I were to really magnify it and pick up that little spot right here, thank you, and ask you what's this picture of, you wouldn't know until I show you the overall. Until the overall. And it's kind of the same thing with the word. We've got to not micronize it. I'll show you something later. So we cannot macronize it so much. If not, we start judging the whole book by one verse. And we've got to understand the verse by the context of the book, by the context of the idea of the book. And this is something that's really important, because if not, we can really make mistakes. You know, if I tell you the end of a story, you know, and Johnny went back home with his dog. His sister waited for him coming back from the hospital and was crying. The end. We don't know what's going on unless we read the story. And in a certain way, it's the same thing with the New Testament, with the Brit. It's the end of the story, it's the last chapter. Really. It's a fulfillment of what's been promised. Without understanding the rest of the book, we totally mess up. So it's really important. So here, we're going to look a little bit. There was two parashas this week. So, you know, so there, you know, I mean, you could study a lot. But what I thought is nice to do is, I like to be able to see what we've been taught in the Brit from how the elements of Torah have been passed on to the Messianic Jewish community. What has been said. So, and there is a very big one on Yom Kippur in the book of Hebrews. So we're going to look a little bit on the book of Hebrews. I was supposed to have a chart and everything, but I'll tell you what happens at Yom Kippur. We find it in Leviticus 16, and the Hebrew is Yom HaKippurim. Yom HaKippurim. The exact translation of that is the Day of Atonement. plural. Okay, the Day of Atonement. Im, whenever you hear im at the end of a Hebrew word, it's plural. Elohim. You see? So, Day of Atonement. That's what it is, Kippurim. Because on that day, the full goal of the day is for Israel to be cleansed. But not all of Israel is going to come in front of the altar. It's going to be redemption by representation. Okay? It's not taxation by representation, it's redemption by representation. And the representation is the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who is also called in Jewish literature a Mashiach, which simply means an anointed one. That's what the word Messiah, Christos, Christ, means. An anointed one. And an anointed one simply means somebody who has had oil poured on top of them. You know, it's really as simple as that. You use the same term to put oil on a pan, oil in a pan, to anoint. It's just that oiled is not as romantic as anointed. You know, but that's what it is. You know, it's really the idea. He's called the Mashiach because he's received oil on it. There are three offices of Mashiach: a prophet, a king, and a priest. And the high priest was a high Mashiach. You know, he was a bit of a foreshadow of Messiah, and this is what we learn in Book of Hebrews. We're going to go there. So, but he was earthly Mashiach. So before he even come to he had to offer offerings for himself. The altar had to be atoned. Everything had to be atoned in order to come to the final goal for him to come in front of that place and put that blood on the side, and so that Israel will be sanctified. And it says these very words: on that day, to Israel, on that day your sins shall be cleaned. So this week I write a devotional every day, and this week I actually wrote a devotional asking the question, well, it says, on this day you shall be cleaned from your sins, but the writer of the book of Hebrews later on says that the blood of bulls and goats cannot clean from sin. If you want to know what's the solution to the conundrum, go to our website. Click on the tab devotion. And there's one for that week. It says contradiction, question mark, something like that. You know, it's not a contradiction. We've got to understand the whole idea. But I don't want to go there because then... but the whole idea was for Israel to get cleansed. Okay, so there was a whole schedule of offerings, and you can read it yourself. It's all in Leviticus 16. What I want to do right now is go to the book of Hebrews. But before we go to the book of Hebrews, I would like to explain you the background of the book of Hebrews. Why it was written. You know, it's really important. Like in America, we have a constitution, right? You've heard about that document, right? The constitution. Yeah. Okay.
Does it still exist?
Well, some people still try to acknowledge it. This constitution, there was a reason why it was written. But today, because that reason is gone, the elements, the rules of that constitution are twisted to actually bring the opposite results of what it was meant to be for. You know, because we don't understand, because we lost the context, and America is not what it was. So, if we want to understand what the book of Hebrews says, we've got to first understand why it was written. And the idea was very simple. I would suggest that it was written between 65 and 70 AD. Okay, between 65 and 70 AD. I will refer to the author of the book, because whereas most people think it's Paul. It hasn't been documented. But it's somebody certainly from the Pauline circle. So I would say the author of the book, okay? And it was written because there was one, up to that, to about 60, don't quote me on years, but it's about that, up to about 60, 80, the Messianic Jewish community enjoyed relative peace. They were very well, I say relative. They went to the synagogue in the morning. Messianic Judaism was just another sect. There was the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, the this, that. They were just another sect within Judaism. That was it. Some people didn't like them, but you know, when you're part of a group, there's always somebody who doesn't like you. You know, that's just normal. So that's what they were. And James had been appointed, who was the brother of Yeshua. Okay, the brother by mom, right? Say mom. He had been appointed the leader of the Jewish community, the Messianic Jewish community in Israel. He was the leader of the big bishop, the big wig. He took the final decisions, and he was called Yaakov HaTzadik. Yaakov HaTzadik. James the righteous, James the just. This title of Tzaddik is not conferred easily in the Bible, in the Torah, or even by the sages, but he was conferred this title by the believers and by the non-believers. He was a born Nazarite, so he had access to the temple, even to the Holy of Holies, and he could go to the Holy of Holies. That's to show you how even the non-believers, they had him so much in esteem. I think he was an excellent example of a Messianic Jewish believer. He was esteemed by the believers and by the non-believers. Even them called him Yaakov HaTzadik. Can you imagine? He could go, he was a born Nazarite, so he could go to the temple, he could go to the Holy of Holies, he could offer the offerings, he could be as a priest and as a high priest. He was basically the high priest of the Messianic community, you know. So it's very, you know, when you read about him, you know how he died? He died thrown by a wicked high priest. That last one, he died thrown from the pinnacle of the temple. And if you remember, Yeshua was there. The devil brought Yeshua there, the pinnacle of the temple. That's how they killed James. They brought him to the pinnacle of the temple and threw him down. And he didn't die. So the high priest came in and clubbed him to make sure, because he hadn't died. You know. So this event turned the page in the Messianic Jewish community of Israel, where enmity was starting to be between the two camps, between the believers and the non-believers. The believers, they saw the fulfillment, at that time they saw the fulfillment of the Master's words, they shall kick you out of the temple and out of the synagogues. And they will whip you and everything. They saw that fulfillment. They said, you know, by the way, just something. Yeshua must have expected that his disciples would continue attending the synagogue and the temple where there are offerings, because he said, they will chase you out of temples and synagogues. Just think about it. He didn't expect them to start going to church instead. You know. So so they started the disciples, the believers, they needed to go to the temple on Passover to offer the sheep. They continued doing that. They needed to have the high priest go on the Yom Kippur and offer the blood so that they have an atonement. They needed to do that. But now they had no access to the temple anymore. And it would be like telling a Frenchman, don't have a glass of wine. Or an American, no more hamburgers. Or, you know, or Chinese, no more rice. You know, it's like, for these believers, they continued. They were never taught that because they were believers, they needed not to go in the temple anymore. They needed to participate in the offerings anymore. They were never taught that. Somebody forgot to tell them. Yeshua didn't teach them that. So here they found themselves, no more temple, we cannot have a Passover lamb anymore, blessed and everything, we can go Yom Kippur and we cannot be redeemed, and whoa. They were desperate. They were desperate. Something needed to happen. So the community of Jewish believers, they didn't know what to do. Many of them actually started just staying by themselves and not fellowshipping. That is why in book of Hebrews you have that verse, forsake not the assembling of yourself. The writer tries to tell them, look, don't isolate yourself. You need fellowship. Okay? And then the writer tries to help them find the solution. And what he does, he helps them to look up. The situation below was bleak as it could be. So he helped them, he told them, look up. And in Hebrews 6:19, Hebrews 6:19, I won't read the whole thing to you. I'm going to skip and jump, I'm giving you a bit of a background, and you can take it for homework at home. You need to read the whole book of Hebrews. It's not very long. But this is really the background. The writer is telling them, look you guys, Hebrews 6:19, we have this hope as a sure and safe anchor for ourselves, a hope that goes right on through to what is inside the parochet, that's the temple stuff, where a forerunner has entered in our behalf, namely Yeshua, who has become a Kohen Gadol forever. So he tells them, look. You don't have a Kohen Gadol who can go for you at Yom Kippur to offer for your redemption, for your cleanliness. You don't have one anymore. But look, we have another one. We have Yeshua who entered as a high priest. But then the writer knows there's going to be a problem with that theology. It's going to be a deep problem. And the problem is that you can't be a high priest if you're not from the tribe of Levi. Yeshua is not from the tribe of Levi. So he's going to have to make a point. So he says to be compared with Melchizedek. So why did he compare to Melchizedek? He needs to make a case here. He needs to make a case. So now I'm going to go to Hebrews 7:1. And I'm reading right now from the Complete Jewish Bible. But later on I will switch to the King James and you'll see why. And I'll show you on the screen why. Hebrews 7:1. This Melchizedek, meaning king of righteousness. We all know who is Melchizedek, right? Melchizedek. Okay. A Kohen of God, Ha-Elyon. Elyon means almighty. A high priest of God Almighty, met Abraham on his way back from the slaughter of the king and blessed him. Also, Abraham gave him 1/10 of everything. So, Abraham tithed to Melchizedek. Melchizedek was a priest. Okay, it says he was a priest. That's what the Torah says. Very skimpy on details, but that's what it says. He was a priest. And Abraham gave him 1/10, gave him tithe. So first of all, by translation of his name, he is the king of righteousness. And then he's also the king of Salem, which means king of peace. There is no record of his father, mother, ancestry, birth, or death. Rather now the author is making a Midrash, okay? He's making a Midrash. A Midrash is a comparison, is an analogy, is using a point to make another point that is valid. And because it says he has no father, mother, ancestry, birth, death, rather he says, like the Son of God, he continues as a Kohen for all times. There is no birth certificate, no pedigree, and there is never a time. And for the Jewish writer, this is very important. For the Jewish student of the word, it's really important. It's not written about his death. It's not written. So, because there's nothing written about his death and his birth, and he's a priest out of... Levi was not born. Levi was Abraham's grandson, great-grandson. So he's a priest out of nowhere. The author is using Melchizedek to compare the priesthood of Messiah. Look how it goes. Look how he does it. And this is a very nice way of seeing how the Jewish mind works. You know, he says, 7:3, there is no record of his father, mother, ancestry, birth, or death. Rather, like the Son of God, he continues as a priest, a Kohen for all time. And then he says, verse 4, just think how great he was. Even the patriarch Abraham giving 1/10 of the choicest spoils. Basically, Abraham tithed to Melchizedek. Let's remember here, the author is making a point explaining why Yeshua is a priest like Melchizedek. He's explaining that. 7:5. Now the descendants of Levi who became priests have a commandment in the Torah to take 1/10 of the income from the people. That is, from their own brothers, despite the fact that they too are descended from Abraham. 6. But Melchizedek, even though he was not descended from Levi, took 1/10 from Abraham. And he blessed Abraham, the man who received God's promises. And it is beyond all dispute that the one who blesses has higher status than the one who receives the blessing. So here he's making the point that Levi, who was still in the loins of Abraham, was subject to another priesthood. You see, a priesthood that had nothing to do with Levi. There was some sort of priesthood here. Levi tithed to somebody who was not a Levite. That's what he's making as a point. You know? So, 7:8, moreover, in the case of the Kohanim, the 10th is received by men who die, while in the case of Melchizedek, it is received by someone who is testified to still be alive. So here the writer reads the word like the Jews read the word. It's not written anywhere about the death of Melchizedek. And it's not written of his birth. So the writer midrashes him, whether he is or not. He midrashes him as somebody with no birth, with no death. And he's going to start easing the idea into the idea of Yeshua. And many believe that this Melchizedek was Yeshua. You know, whether it was or not, you decide. Some teach that he was Shem. He was still alive. Shem could still have been alive in the days of Abraham. Whether he is or not, you decide. It's not for me to say. I'm too young to know. You know. I know it's my birthday today, but I'm still too young. You know, so, and then he says 7:9, one who might go even further and say that Levi, who himself received 10th, paid 1/10 through Abraham, inasmuch as he was still his ancestor in Abraham's body when Melchizedek met him. So 7:11, therefore, if it had been possible to reach the goal, now he's talking about Levi because Levi has the priesthood, let's call it the earthly priesthood. Okay? If it had been possible to reach the goal through the system of priesthood derived from Levi, he says, if it would have been possible to reach the goal of redemption, the goal of purity, he says, what need would there have been for another different kind of Kohen, of priest? What need? He says, why? why would they? He's just made the point. Where there is another type of priest who is not from Levi, where does he come from? And if there is Levi who gives us all we need, why is there another one? Why would there have need? What need would there have been for another different kind of Kohen, the one spoken of to be compared with Melchizedek and not to be compared with Aaron? So, for if the system of Kohanim, of priesthood, is transformed, there must necessity occur a transformation of Torah. The one about whom these things are said belongs to another tribe from which no one has ever served at the altar. Everyone knows that our Lord arose out of Judah, that Moshe said nothing about this tribe when he spoke about priesthood. So, we know, yes, Yeshua, I just mentioned Yeshua would be priest, but there is nothing about somebody from the tribe of Judah being priest. You see, we've got to kind of really connect the dots here. You know, and he's not afraid of, the writer is not afraid to bring out the problems. Yeah, well, I know I'm saying that, and I know it's an issue. You know, but look at this guy Melchizedek, where's it come from? You know, it's like, he's another priest. And Levi, you give him tithe, you know. So, 7:15, it becomes even clearer if a different kind of Kohen, one like Melchizedek, arises, one who became a Kohen, not by virtue of a rule in the Torah concerning physical descent, but by virtue of the power of an indestructible life. And then he brings a verse to make his point. He brings a verse, for it is stated, 7:17, you are a Kohen forever to be compared with Melchizedek. This was King David from the tribe of Judah. For those who came to our class last week, we talked about how King David made a tabernacle in Zion, while there was still one in Shiloh by the Levites, where they were still doing offering. But he brought the ark in Zion and made a tabernacle there, right? He was from the tribe of David, from the tribe of Judah. You know, he made another tabernacle. That's the one in Acts 15 where I told about for the Gentiles, the tabernacle, that's called the tent of David. There's a song about it. The tabernacle of David, that's what it's called. So, I want to read Psalm 110. He's quoting Psalm 110. Now, Psalm 110 with the early Jewish believers in Israel, that was the messianic psalm by excellence. We'll go back to Hebrews though, so keep your finger on it or your pager. You know. Here, actually, what I'm going to do is put it on the screen. I'm going to put it on the screen here. Bible books, Psalm 110, and I'm going to put it in complete Jewish Bible. I'm going to make it a bit bigger.
Thank you.
I'm going to try. If I can find where there should be a place to make it bigger. Let me see. Let me see. There should be a place to make it. No, there's not. I would have to fiddle around. I'll try to fiddle around with a screen someday. But it says, in King James where I told, the Lord said unto my Lord, the first one capital letters, the second one not capital letters. In King James, whenever you have Lord written in full capital letters, it's because the original Hebrew would say Yod He Vav He. Okay? Here it says, Adonai say to my Lord. Now, for those of you who can read the Hebrew, it says here, Yod He Vav He. Okay, I'm sorry, it's small. Le Adoni. Okay? In the King James says, the Lord say to my Lord. The Hebrew here says, Yod He Vav He. the sacred name, Le Adoni. Okay? Adonai said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Adonai will send your powerful scepter out of Zion, so you will rule over your enemies around you. This is King David saying that, prophesying, I guess. On the day your forces mobilize, your people willingly offer themselves in holy splendor from the room of the dawn. The dew of your youth is yours. Adonai has sworn it. He will never retract. You are a Kohen forever, to be compared with Melchizedek. You know, we were wondering last week how come David got the guts to establish another tabernacle. He was not even a Levite. Where did he get the guts to do that? Well, it seems like he's been given permission. He's been given permission here. So you're a priest, but not according to the order of Aaron, but according to the order of Melchizedek. So the writer of the book of Hebrews is bringing that point, like there is the Levite priesthood on earth, but there is another priesthood. You're following me? You know. So, verse 5: Adonai at your right hand will shatter kings on the day of his anger. He will pass judgment among the nations, filling it with dead bodies. He will shatter heads through an extensive territory. He will drink from a stream as he goes on his way. Therefore, he will hold his head high. Well, that's going to be Mashiach ben David, who's going to come. It's going to be different here. So, okay. So here now, this is Psalms 110. Now, back to Hebrews 7. So then he says, and this part of Hebrews is often taken as an antithesis to Torah, saying, oh, you see, the Torah is bad. This is why I'm reading it. This is why I'm reading it, because it's a chapter that's often used to tell us, oh, you see, the Torah is inefficacious. You know, it's used and we've got to be able to answer that. We've got to be able to answer that. So we've got to talk about it. I wrote about three articles this week on our website about it. It's really important. We've got to be able to talk about it. You know, we'll be asked this question. So he says, 7:18, thus on the one hand, the earlier rule is set aside because of its weakness and inefficacy. And then it says, for the Torah did not bring anything to the goal. Oh, he's saying the Torah was inefficacious?
What verse is that?
7:18 and 19.
Would you explain what that word means?
Ineffective, unprofitable.
Ineffective. It cannot be meaning that. I mean, that would be horrible. It cannot be meaning, oh, the Torah is worth nothing. You can't do it. No.
Just knowing.
You see, we've been taught that. We've been taught to read these things with the understanding that Old and New Testament, and I'm using Christian words, are an antithesis to each other. First, people were trying to do by the law, and now it's by grace. But that's an invention. It's never been so. The Torah was never implied. Following the Torah was never a works to do in order to gain salvation. Never. It was never understood that way. It started, the Pharisees started that maybe one or 200 years, maybe 100, 150 years before Yeshua. They started to bring out this sort of doctrine, but it was not understood that way. You see, what really spoke of redemption, of atonement, was the morning and evening lambs. Those were the ones. The morning and evening lambs. The Torah is a constitution, the law of the land. It's a bit like I became American. I was given it, but I still have to follow the law of the country. The fact that I became American does not absolve me from obeying the laws of the country. Actually, it puts me under the obligation of the laws of the country. You see, so, and the Torah is the laws of the kingdom of God, period. If we're accepting the kingdom, that's the laws of the kingdom of God, that's it. It's nothing about salvation. We already got salvation. Actually, the Exodus proves that. The Exodus shows that Israel was redeemed, rescued, before there was even a Torah given. It was by grace, if you ask me. It was by election. It was because he heard their cry. It was by compassion. It was by... There was not even a Torah given at that time. So, and to me, the Exodus is the imagery of the program of redemption. They talk about the 4 steps of salvation. To me, look to Exodus. Okay? That's the idea. But the redemption and going out of Egypt is not the end. There is going to the Red Sea, which is like a form of mikvah, baptism. But then there's one more step before going to that promised land. We've got to make a stopover at Mount Sinai. That's part of the program. That's part of the program. But we cannot read. We cannot read these two in antithesis. What the Torah was, what the Levitical priesthood, what it was inefficacious in, was in cleaning the conscience. We'll see later on. The book of Hebrews continues. It says, what it means is that it says later on, and we'll read it. It says the offerings, they were only for the cleansing of the flesh. The atonements were so that it was a question of purification of the temple and of Israel, so we could approach God, having been cleansed. So we could go to the temple, because without that you can't go to it's more the purification of being mortals, but that takes us to God. But it's not about the conscience. It says it later in the book. We'll read it. I'm going a little bit ahead because you asked me the question. It was inefficacious in cleaning the conscience, because its role was not to clean the conscience. The role was to clean the flesh. It was an atonement, a cleanliness, a ritual purity type of thing. So, it's the priesthood of Messiah that cleans the conscience. Yes, ma'am?
Can you say that again? So the offering was for cleansing of flesh. The atonement was for the clearing of conscience?
No, I'm sorry. What I was saying is that the offerings of blood of bulls and goats, these were at Yom Kippur, those were for a ritual cleansing of the country, of the people, so that we could approach God. They could not clean our conscience. And the writer of the book of Hebrews says so. And he doesn't say it because he's a New Testament writer. He says it because he knows what it was. He'd never been able to. He's saying, if it would have cleaned our conscience, we wouldn't have had to do it every year. But we're doing it every year because it does not. We still get dirty again. We still get dirty again. So it's just kind of it's like the Levitical priesthood is an earthly priesthood. Then he talks about the heavenly priesthood, which is, of course, the priesthood of Yeshua. So this is where this is going. This is where this is going. He's not putting one in antithesis to the other. He's putting them together within their own function. Each one has their function.
So verse 18 then is talking about the Levitical priesthood then, would you say?
Let me go back there.
I have it in New King James here. For on the one hand, there is annulling of the former commandment because of its weakness and unprofitableness.
Yeah, it's very strong King James language.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very strong.
So what is the former commandment then? What?
Okay? On the one hand, the earlier rule is set aside because its weakness and inefficacy, and on the other hand, a hope of something better is introduced. Basically, he's bringing the two. So on one hand, there is the sanctification of the flesh, which comes in through the Levitical system, okay? But it's got to go along with, it's a little bit like they talk about circumcision of the flesh, then they also talk about circumcision of the heart. People put it in antithesis with the other, but actually, they go together. You see what I mean? So it's not an antithesis. The language of the King James betrays us a little bit because it's talking about annulment. He says he would, on the one hand, the earlier rule is set aside because of its weakness and inefficacy, for the Torah did not bring anything to the goal. And on the other hand, a hope of something better is introduced. So he's bringing the two side by side. This is the text from the Complete Jewish Bible, which did not use that word annulling.
What word did it use?
Because there couldn't be an annulling of the commandment. The commandment cannot be annulled.
No.
You know, so somehow I don't know why that wording made its way. We cannot. These commandments are forever, they were saying.
What word was used instead of annul? What did you use?
In the Complete Jewish Bible, it says set aside.
Set aside.
It says set aside. On the one hand, the earlier rule is set aside because of its weakness and inefficacy. And on the other hand, a hope of something better is introduced. So basically, basically, the writer is bringing out the fact that there is two priesthood. That there is two priesthood. There is one that cannot bring everything to completeness. That cannot bring us the complete plan of redemption without the other one. This is what is the point that he is bringing. I know it's kind of a little bit, yes.
Maybe not everyone knows what inefficacy means.
I'm sorry?
What does inefficacy mean? Do you want to explain that?
Inefficacy. Inefficacious. Ineffective. I mean, not ineffective. Ineffective for a certain purpose. Like he explains later that the law, the Levite priesthood could not clean the conscience. It's inefficacious for the cleaning of the conscience. You see, and the fact is, it has to be redone every year. It has to be redone every time. It's a little bit like. It's like saying like soap is inefficacious for cleaning because we have to do it every day. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have to clean every day, you know. And but soap does clean temporarily, but I have to do it still. So it's not inefficacious for the cleansing, but it doesn't bring a permanent solution to the problem of dirt. and this is a little bit the same way. It doesn't bring a permanent solution to the problem of uncleanliness and sin. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah.
That's what he's saying. Because, you know, I know the word, the King James says annul, some other word says this, says that, but we've got to go by the context, and the context is what? That the commandments are forever. So, and I do not believe, some people, they want to put aside the book of Hebrews and the book of Galatians because they seem to go against the Torah in these words. I believe that they're not against. I think we need to learn to read to read what they're saying properly. We need to learn to read what they're saying. I'd be very careful before canning certain books of these people. To me, I cannot judge them. If something doesn't seem to fit, I would blame the translation before I blame the writer and the book. First of all, I do not know the writer, so I cannot say anything bad about it. It will be a sin to be seen to say, yeah, the writer, I've heard it, you know. The writer of the book of Hebrews, he, blah, 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 blah. Whoa, that's Lashon Hara. I'm sorry. First of all, he's probably dead and not supposed to talk bad of dead people. You know? So, to me, and I read the rest of the book of Hebrew, and I think the guy was a genius. And I'm not there, so I would blame the translation and my lack of understanding before I would say the word speaks against. I know that the word of the commandment of the Levite is forever. So it cannot be talking about annulment, but he makes a comparison, just like in Jewish language. In Hebrew we say, he loved Rachel and hated Leah. He didn't hate Leah, he had a few kids with her. You know, it's a way of talking. There is a Semitic way of talking that we lose in our Western culture of English. So we need to always remember that. Plus the text has come to us from the Greek also. And we're reading it with a mind which is very far away from the culture of this understanding. So I would not judge the book, but I would say, well, it's inefficacious in the idea of total cleanliness. Yeah, that's true. That we understand.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you say that King David moved, he set up another thing?
Mm-hmm.
And so there was only one, you know,
Tabernacle,
ark?
yeah.
Yeah, so how did he get?
He took it.
How did they, like, was that not a big battle, or?
No, what happened is that, and this is an amazing story, we studied it last week at our home.
Really, just last week?
Yeah, it's like he you know, you remember the tabernacle was brought from Sinai and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was pitched somewhere, and then there was a war with the Philistine, and they went to, but then the Philistine took it.
Right, something
Yeah,
about
then they sent it back.
sent it back with it, yeah. I got
Yeah,
that.
and they sent it back, and it stayed at Kiryat Jearim.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody ever cared to bring it back to where it belonged, which was Shiloh. That poor ark. Nobody cared to bring it home.
They
Saul
were afraid
didn't
to
care.
have it, yeah.
Nobody cared to bring that poor ark home.
Oh,
You know. But David, he gave it a home. But he didn't bring it back to Shiloh. He made the tabernacle of David on Mount Zion. You know, and if you want to know more, I'll send you some notes. You know. Okay. So, and the hope of something better is introduced, verse 19, which we are drawing near to God. The priesthood of Messiah, that's the priesthood of Messiah, which does clean the conscience. I'm going ahead there, but you'll see later it's going to say that. What is more, 7:20, God swore an oath, for no oath was sworn in connection with those who become Kohanim now. But Yeshua became a Kohen. Remember, he's making the point of Yeshua being a Kohen, being a priest, without being a Levite. Okay? But Yeshua being a Kohen, by the oath which God swore when he said to him, Adonai has sworn and will not change his mind, you are a Kohen forever. So he brings that verse to Yeshua. He brings Psalms 110 to Yeshua. Okay? And so this shows how much better is the covenant of which Yeshua become guarantor. So what he's doing here, we got to understand the thing. People read that, yeah, the covenant of Yeshua is better, so out with the Levites and the blood, or well, that's Old Testament. No, that's not what he's doing. He's encouraging of people who has been barred from the temple. He said, look, okay, I know you can't go to the temple. He said, but look, I'm going to tell you something. You still got the better part of it left with you. And he's trying to show them how they can't go to the temple, but they still have Yeshua, who has a priesthood in heaven. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I would like more explanation, please,
Yeah.
on the difference between cleansing in the Old Testament Torah to approach God. The ritual cleaning was the blood of the bull and goats. Well, what's the difference in when Yeshua cleans our conscience? Okay, I need to know what the conscience is compared to being clean enough to approach God.
Okay. You know what? Can I get into that one a bit later?
Sure.
Okay. This will take the rest of the thing. This will take the rest of the thing. Okay. So we've got to go away from that mind frame that actually the writer is writing about one thing against the other, because he's not. He's trying to show, look, there is one part, you still have one part of the deal, and that's the best one. Because that part, nobody can take away from you. You know. Now what I want to do is go to Hebrews 1:8:1, but I'm going to put it here with the King James. Okay. Hebrews. I'm going to show you something that's going to totally change the way we can read this. Okay. Now he's made a point of a different priesthood. That has something, the soap that you never get dirty from. Okay, the soap that cleans you once and for all, okay? the heavenly soap for your conscience. Okay, this is what he's talking about. I hope this is not blasphemous. You know. So, but what I'm showing you on the screen here is King James. These little green things here are the Strong's numbers, okay? Because they have the translation. Okay? So here, and again, let's not get too attached to little things, because then we're going to lose the point of the story, because I need to get to chapter 9. None of the things which we have spoken of now, of the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. He's going to make a summary of what they talked about. Okay? We have such a high priest. He's talking about Yeshua, who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty of the heavens. On the right hand, he's using Jewish language. You know the song that we sing, Ana bechoa begdulat yemincha. Yemincha is your right hand. It's one of the names of Messiah. You know, so he talks about. He says, of the things of which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such a high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heaven, a minister of the sanctuary and the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched and no man. Oh, it's talking about the tabernacle that the Lord pitched. He's going to explain himself. For every high priest is ordained to offer gifts and sacrifices. Therefore, it is of necessity that this man have somewhat also to offer. He's talking, it is necessity that it's Yeshua, this priest, also offers something. Okay? He's comparing the whole earthly priesthood with the heavenly priesthood. For if he were on earth, this heavenly priesthood, okay, Yeshua, if he were on earth, the heavenly priest, he should not be a priest, seeing that there are priests that offer gifts according to the Torah. He said if Yeshua was on earth, he would not be a priest in a sense, because he's not a Levite. He's got a different priesthood. Who serve unto the example and shadow of the heavenly things. The Levite is a shadow of the heavenly things. As Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacles, God told him, see that you make all things according to the pattern showed thee in the mount. So he's saying, you remember how God says, you got to do everything like it's written in the month. This is Hebrew 8:5. So he said, like you saw in the month. So he's saying, so basically what you have on earth, you want to know what heaven looks like? Well, look at the tabernacle. That's there. Look at the tabernacle. That's a picture of the throne. So who serve as an example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished. Okay, verse 6. But now, this heavenly priest, Kohen, hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant. Again, we're not talking one covenant against the other. And I'm reading King James on purpose, because I'm going to show you something, okay? Better is it's a maybe stronger, the soap that don't need to be used again, okay? As opposed to the soap that you have to use every day. You know, where was I? 6 is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. He's telling them, look guys, you're losing your place in the earthly temple, okay, but look, you have Yeshua, the high priest of the heavenly realms, the guy who's going to give you even something better than that rotten Sadducee high priest could have ever given you here. That rotten, because the Sadducees were really corrupt. You know, he killed James for politics, for corruption. Yeshua was the victim of a corruption between the Sadducees and the Romans. It was a political murder, you know, and the Sadducees were all part of it, the high priesthood, you know. So he's telling them, forget these guys. They don't want you. Good riddance of bad rubbish. I want to show you something even better. They are the shadow of the real thing. Now look at the real thing, he's telling them. That's what he's doing. He's not pitting one against the other. He's trying to encourage the community. You see what I mean? You see what he's doing here? The context of the story helps you here. And he says, for finding fault with them, okay, now, 7. For if that first covenant had been faultless, ding, 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 we have a problem. I don't know if you can see very well. In King James Bibles, you have words in italics. The italics word, it's an honest translation. Because, for example, in Hebrew, you do not have the verb to be in the present tense. So when you need to write it in English, it will be added in the King James in italics to show you that it's a word added by the editor in order to aid the translation. It's very good, okay? So in this version here, that's on the board, you have the Strong's translation, okay? Every word has its translation. And if you notice, in verse 7, covenant is in italics and has no little greeny number for a translation.